got
Dude,
YouTube still doesn't have it. Yep, YouTube's got it. All right.
I'm on there.
Uh-oh.
Oh no, I see it on Facebook now.
Okay, it's working. Hello, everybody. If you can hear us out in the interwebs.
On the
Check.
Let's see. It says we're live on Facebook. Hey, there we go. It says we're live on YouTube's acting weird.
YouTube.
Come on, YouTube. Could be our internet here, though.
It told me it was up a minute ago.
Okay, good. All right. If anybody can see us online, drop a comment. Tell us, make us feel better that it's actually working. Okay, I got excellent connection. Yeah. We're on both. Boom. Magic.
What is this? Matthew 18. Okay. Really?
One more book.
Dave, you're moving so much, Dave.
What is he?
You're gonna paint the room too?
Yeah, he decided he didn't like it.
I'm trying to build stuff for my computer to sit on. I'm using a bed. It's too soft, so I'm putting books.
Oh yeah.
I have to extend the book island. There we go.
What in the world? Man, y'all ready to do this?
I'm ready.
Now we don't, Chris. We don't have the music or anything. Whatever you guys play with the girls or something like that.
No, we'll put that in later. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Do you know the intro words though? Do you know how?
Hey, I just freestyle it, man.
Say welcome.
Yeah,
freestyle.
Yeah, I do the walk. Yeah, I'll do it. Look at Chris.
All right, I like it. I'm only catching every fifth sentence you say, so go ahead, Elliot.
Wait a minute, why?
I don't know. It's probably the church internet. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't bode well for other things. Okay. Anyway.
All right. So this is Sunday Recap, our weekly sermon podcast where we talk about life and faith based off our sermon this past Sunday. So for sermon recordings and more podcasts, visit begrace.org /podcast. For more information about Grace Bible Church, visit begrace.org. Hi, I'm Elliot. And
I'm Dave.
Oh, we're going that way.
Yes.
I'm Jim.
I'm Chris.
Yes, and that's the whole crew. Joy is doing something with Impact Bible Club, so I'm sure he's working hard. I think so. I'm kind of replacing him. I'm the B side. I just come in whenever they need a pinch hit. So I'm happy to be here. Happy to be here with you guys and to talk about the sermon. So I say let's get right to it, Dave, and let's talk about it. I want to know if you could tell us what was your big idea for the sermon. I know we're talking about Stories of the King. This is a series that you've been going through, and it's been really great. And this one was called How to Become Great, right? Matthew 18. Mm-hmm. So if you can kind of tell us what was your big idea and what did you want us to walk away with as the listener?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Main idea is the paradox of greatness in life, in the world, with God, comes from humility. I think just wanting people to walk away with a roadmap that humility looks like a good thing, that's what Christ asks of us, and that can, bring joy in our life, but also bless others.
Amen. Now, when you was thinking about this sermon, I think you had said before you kind of already had the schedule based on different, the different scriptures. So when you think about this one today, Dave, this was obviously seem relevant. But what were some of your thoughts when you start to work through this in regards to application for us to at the current age in our nation?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I'm always trying to make some application to current events, but this one seemed more personal kind of than the previous one. So I think my applications were more like you got to you got to do business with you. More of that focus on like you got to deal with, do you know Jesus? Have you humbled yourself? You've got to deal with, are you inviting sin into your life, that you need to cut out? And then I think the last one was probably the more broadly applicable to society, which was rejoicing in the humble. That last point was how God goes after us, like the parable of the sheep, the lost sheep. So I think that last one probably had the most social application. All of them do, for sure. But the first two, I was really trying to hit people hard with their personal choices.
Chris, can you talk about like how did it impact you, brother? I know listen to this one.
Yeah. I mean, I think I continue to think about and watch the culture. They're either public figures pretending to be perfect so that they can get people to follow them, or sort of tribes setting up their leaders as perfect and refusing to ever admit that there's anything wrong with an organization, that there's anything wrong with any leader. And so I guess that was my first feeling, was how just totally opposite of the way of doing business it is for our country, right? I think again and again, I just keep being struck by the fact that admitting any wrong or any fault or any weakness is seen as a death blow to any leadership in today's culture. And so, I mean, and the reason is that because they don't have Jesus above them, in their mind, it's all up to them. So,
What about you, Jim? I know you the one that provide all wisdom here.
Yeah, right.
Elder statesman. Please give us some of your wisdom in regards.
Oh man, that's going to be a disappointment. Well, the thing that strikes me from this passage is how, in the negative sense, is how easy it is for us to get caught up in comparison and looking at other people and think, well, I'm doing better than them. At least I'm not doing that, right? And so I don't know, it feels like it's something that happens all the time in our lives, that we see other people doing something and somehow we don't notice that we're doing the very same thing. Right?
Yes. That's good. For me, it was really, I like the beginning when it talks about the little ones, like just coming to Christ. I always think of that just as a child, when you come to your parents, you have nothing, man. You have nothing, totally dependent, very impressionable. And so you just and so I think about coming to Christ like that. Just want to be fed and to learn and not to and just not to know everything, but just to depend on Him. So now we do that in today's context. That, like Chris was saying, that can be hard, right? So Dave, you had 3 points for us. You had convert to humility and don't trip the humble, rejoice in the humble. So I guess we'll look at that first one. Kind of walk us through convert to humility. I apologize. Convert to humility. Matthew 18, 1 through 4. Kind of talk about that one for us.
Yeah. I mean, the big main point is I use convert on purpose. The translations have different words. The one translation I was reading out of says turn and humble yourself. And then he uses the phrase, if you don't, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. So I was trying to summarize that with the word convert. Like you've got to make a change, just like kind of a decisional focus of you can't get there on your own by your own strength or your own provision. You've got to convert to a completely new way of seeing things. And really probably had floating around the back of my mind the you must be born again passage from John 3. But here he says, turn, become like a child, humble yourself, or you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. So just really trying to emphasize the drama of that, that I think we're in a day and age where we talk a lot about the subtlety of the gospel and how it shapes us over time, which is true and important. But this was one of those passages that just hit really hard. Like, no, you gotta stop what you're doing and give up on the old way and trust in Jesus. It's a new thing.
Wow. So part of that was the disciples arguing about being the greatest, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that, like this idea
Yeah.
trying to collaborate to figure out, man, who's going to be the greatest?
Yeah. So that comes up in chapter 20, and then it comes up in some parallel passages from other gospels. This particular passage, you don't see it like right in these particular verses, but we see it all over the place in the gospels. So it's like we just kind of know that's the kind of thing the disciples do, and we know that's the kind of thing we do. So Chris mentioned leaders, using greatness for power, and Jim mentioned how we just compare ourselves to others. Like that's just a thing we all struggle with. So our relative position to other people does not save us, and that's such a human thing. Like, well, I'm not as bad as that guy, so that means I'm going to heaven. You're like, what? Where do we even get that? I don't know. That's just a weird thing. But yeah, Jesus does not give them any room to do that.
To breathe. I wonder what was the criteria they were trying to develop. Like, was it how many works did they do? Like, I wonder, because the word doesn't really tell us what criteria they thought they were going to get.
Man, chapter 20. So the closest one to this is in chapter 20, where James and John Zebedee, their mom, comes to Jesus, which is kind of funny.
That is funny.
So it's like this mom negotiating with Jesus. Can my son sit at your left and right? Like, it's so weird.
Can we say ultimate helicopter mom?
Yeah. I think, I guess somewhat in context of ancient kingship, it kind of makes sense, but it's still just so weird. It's funny. I think they were thinking political position. I think they were thinking power. Jesus was going to be king. That's a big misunderstanding a lot of times, is that Jesus was going to be this reigning king, take over Herod's palace, kick him out, then kick out the Romans. That much more sword-wielding kingship is what they were expecting.
So, Chris, how do you see this today, man? With this idea of, I know Dave said converting to humility. How have you seen the opposite, like even in the body of Christ?
That's good. I mean, I guess the one that comes to mind is most often is we want to become experts at Christianity and become, basically graduate from this sort of childlike dependency on it's not a word, but dependence is. And but I think the thing that I see Jesus doing, which is really fascinating, I think Dave mentioned it last week, is he's telling these stories that require him to explain them. And he keeps, in some ways, saying these paradoxical, the least must become the greatest. And, it's kind of this thing where it's just like, if you don't have Jesus walking by your side and you're just looking at him and saying, what does that mean? You're just, there's no real like perfect way to say, I've got it figured out. Let's move on to whatever else. It's a Jesus, hold my hand, because I don't know the next step. It's not that nothing can be known, but it is that the only way is a way of tension and a way of dependence on Jesus. And so I think that's what I see people trying to do, is to stop needing Jesus, and or they figured out some new doctrine and now we don't need Jesus as much. But I don't think that's the option Jesus gives us, really.
And Jim, man, back to you. How do you think we can do this well? Like out of your years of faith, how have you seen this, or embracing your experience? How do we do this well? This converting to humility.
Well, I think that it's the constant reminding ourselves of why Jesus came. It's not because I was so good. It's because I needed a Savior so much.
Yes.
And that doesn't change every day. We've discovered new reasons, right? If we're honest with ourselves, and so, the way to make it a consistent part of our lives is to constantly be looking at, okay, am I really as good as I think I am? Or, how much do I need Jesus today? Right? Yeah. Because it's really easy to get lost in the comfortable life and think because I'm comfortable, that means I got the gospel and but comfort is an indication of salvation, right? So, yeah.
Wow, that's good. Dave, now part of this, Jesus uses this, I guess the analogy with a child. You talk about a little bit, man, in that culture, in that context, the issue with children, like them not being seen as, I won't say fully human, but just not treated the same as adults.
Yeah.
Him using that as the example.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think that is very modern, how we kind of fawn over our children, that they would not have done that in the same way. I mean, definitely a mother or father would delight in their children. That happened. That's in the Bible. But just across the board, culturally, they were definitely seen as kind of, less than human or semi-human, or, they weren't seen as important. They couldn't really accomplish much. They couldn't do much, especially a little child, So yeah, I think we might miss that this was even more stark in that culture than it is in our culture. That might be the simplest way to say it. We can get ourselves into trouble if we're overly specific, but just definitely children were seen as smaller, stupider, and less significant in ancient culture. So we kind of honor them more in our culture.
Yeah. So that drastic conflict. Oh, woo!
Yay!
You got applause?
Hey, the sound effect. So the big contrast between being the greatest and now you all the way to a child. So it's like Jesus is almost like the proverbial slap in the face.
Yeah.
Like, no, you are down here to be the greatest. And that is so antithetical to what we believe even today, like in our culture. So the culture shock for us when we start talking about how we ought to respond. So that's the first. Did you have Did you have an application in particular?
It was basically, if you don't know Jesus, you need to turn and trust in Jesus. If you've been trusting in something else. And then I also just talked about how for Christians it's an ongoing decision. So it's a daily decision to keep turning your life over, keep humbling yourself, keep confessing, I really can't do this. I'm in a place professionally as a pastor where, man, we have no idea what we're doing week to week. I feel more dumb, more childlike, more, like Chris was saying, I gotta walk along holding Jesus's hand. Like I do not know what I'm doing. And in a lot of ways, that's really good for us to be in that position. So.
Whew, man, this is humbling. I guess that's the whole point, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, well, let's look at the second point that you made. Don't trip the humble. Matthew 18:5-9. Now, man, I got to be honest with you, Dave. I was waiting. We were waiting and waiting and waiting for you to say entangled, but you didn't say it.
Entangled? Whoa.
Because right now that word entanglement has been really funny in our community. But we're waiting for you to say it, but you didn't say it. So.
Oh, what does it mean? Tell me. I don't even know what it means.
Like Chris had mentioned earlier about celebrity or people in public. So right now it's the issue with one of our black celebrity couples who came forth with about marital issues and the wife said that she was in an entanglement, meaning that she was in an affair. So we were hoping that you didn't say it, but we were gonna laugh if you did say it. But you didn't say it because it's a lot of memes going around about entanglement. So it's pretty funny.
So like people are making fun of her saying that because she's like trying to. It's like a euphemism. She's trying to like be vague.
Okay. Right. Be vague. However, what was really ironic is that in the dictionary, entanglement literally means that you are in a complicated. So she was actually using it the right way, but it sounds like she was trying to minimize it. So she's
It sounds less sinful when you say it that way.
Right. Yeah. So we were hoping that you didn't say it, but man, we were gonna laugh if you did say it.
Yeah. Well, I think the application fits. Get out of that entanglement.
Don't trip the humble. So can you tell us a little bit about this point?
Yeah, man, this one's crazy. This was one of those where I was really trying to focus on like main pointism, because he covers a lot of ground, right? Like there's just a lot of stuff he covers here. And this is a really famously severe passage, right? It's a hard saying of Jesus. And it's also, I just feel like it's talked about a lot, but in a lot of different ways, you know? So it's just kind of like floating out there. If you've been a Christian and heard the Bible taught, you've probably heard 5 or 10 versions of this. And probably most of them are not like way off base. It's just, there's just a lot to it. So, so I think I was trying to say, okay, he's talking about humility at the end. He's talking about humility at the beginning. So he's got to, in some level, still be talking about humility here, right? So that's a Bible study principle that I'm doing. And I'm like, okay, he's using the phrase little one, so he's still talking about humility there. But then he goes off on this tangents about yourself, right? And so that was a little odd. So I was just trying to weave it together. I was just trying to like, what are the things that verses 5 and 6 have in common with verses 7, 8, and 9? You know, so 5 and 6 is about humble ones, and you better not do anything to hurt them, or I'm going to drown you with the boulder, right? Like it's a violent warning. And then 7, 8, and 9 are kind of related, you know, because he's still warning them. He's warning about hell, like don't do this, and he's using the same thing about causing to sin, you know. So I think in context he's saying take sin seriously, and that was my biggest, I think, I guess you'd say application. Like take it seriously, cut it out, stop messing around, and so it relates to our view of the humble around us. Don't take advantage of them, right? Like there's a way in which we can not take sin seriously and hurt humble people in our culture, right? Like we're going to have humble people in our culture that are going to be strugglers, and we got to be patient and careful with them. And then he's also saying, and yourself too, right? Like, so anyway, I think I probably could have spent about 12 more hours on this to make it make more sense. But
so is it based on how you explain it? It sounds like it's almost like this idea of also don't be a hypocrite. Like don't call someone to do something while at the same time you need to be worried about your own stuff too. Like has that element to it. But I just wanted to pose the question to everyone. Like what do you think are some ways that we could cause little ones to sin? Like what?
Well, I'm starting to see a connection here between the personal part of it and how it affects other people, because sin never just affects us, right?
Yeah.
We may be destroying ourselves with sin, but the effect of that on our relationships with other people, because we'll withdraw from them and we'll isolate and we'll treat them differently because of what we're doing, also hurts them. So yeah, I see there's a connection there.
That's good.
That's good. Well, and that reminds me of Galatians 6. It says, brother, if anyone is caught in any transgression, so he's kind of got that caught. I mean, there's kind of that same similar vibe of, you know, the trapping or tripping. But if you're caught in a transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness, but keep watch on yourself lest you be tempted. So that's Galatians 6:1, which seems to have kind of a similar vibe too, right? Like that kind of, be careful, be cautious.
What about you, Chris? What do you think about that?
Sorry, I got poor internet. I missed your question. Say again.
Oh no, I was asking, like, what do you think are some ways we can cause, like, one of these little ones to sin?
Well, I was gonna ask Dave to make. I wanted to ask in my own head. So, do you know the linguistically in 18:5 or 18:6? Sorry, is that talking about literal children or, you know, metaphorical children, or do we know?
Good question. I think the context makes us, verse 6 makes us say
both
believers.
Right.
Believers.
It is believers, because he says, so he's kind of continuing with, if you receive one such child, what kind of child? Well, the such of a child that he'd just been talking about, the illustration of belief. And then verse 6, one of these little ones who believes in me. So I think he's hit it on both sides. Like, this is mainly about faith, and the humble who believe is really what he's moving on to here. So like, we're gonna be in the business, and I tried to hit the way I said it in both sermons was a culture. We got to build a culture where we're watching out for the humble, and part of that culture is a watching out of ourselves as well. I mean, best illustration I can think of is my old mentor, Gary DeSalvo, that passed away back in, I guess, August. He was like one of the like most outgoing, like aggressive, fun, confident pastors I've ever known. Just super outgoing. And he had a very like healthy, humble, I could sin and ruin my life at any moment. So I feel like he lived this out, like that kind of humility, where he was bold. He went after people and he did ministry and he went full speed. And he was like, oh yeah, I take all kinds of precautions. I put a lot of boundaries in my life. I do a lot of things to guard myself because I'm not all that. Like I don't, like I'm not so powerful that I would just like not sin, So anyway, I feel like that I saw that lived out in him, just like a real seriousness about temptation.
Yeah, I think that's what comes to mind for me as far as causing like either young believers or just just young believers or new believers or just people who struggle a lot. I think setting up like you said, the culture. If the two things I think of are example and then environment. So like setting up the example of again, I will never say I could do anything wrong. The way to be a good leader is to act perfect and pretend basically, and never have a hard conversation or never. So that's one huge way I've seen the church, and not intentionally, but cause people growing up in the church to stumble, is saying, if I'm going to be a leader, I have to be better than everybody else and more perfect. And then
okay, I want to. That's
go ahead. What was
I
that?
Say, I want to do my sermon over now, but go ahead.
That's
good.
True. That's so true.
And then environmentally too. So they do that to themselves, leadership wise, and then they do that to people beneath them, and don't make a safe place to say, hey, I not only how are you struggling, let's pray and talk about and get through it, but more than that, I know you're struggling because we're all struggling. And so that's another way you can cause them to stumble, is you show them that you should never admit. So those are the two big ways that come to mind for me.
Can you repeat the two big ways? You just broke off that last sentence.
We probably should just keep going. I got it recorded on my audio. Sorry, my internet. I'm at the church and the internet's terrible.
Which is kind of scary because the teens are going to be broadcasting next week, so we got to get that fixed.
Yeah,
all right.
When I look at this, definitely with Chris, I think more of like the way you live your life can literally cause someone to sin by your example. Whether that be how you interact with people, how you love people well, the things that you subscribe to, all those different things, especially with new believers, they gravitate to. So if they don't see any confession, any like humility, any acknowledgement of your own struggles. Again, that's why one of the reasons why I love Celebrate Recovery, because every week you get to expose yourself. So the good thing to me, you constantly are in this this life of repentance in front of people, and I think that's a good thing. So I think it's a slippery slope when we don't do that, because people start to believe that as a Christian that you have to be perfect. You don't struggle with anything, and if you do struggle, you got to be quiet. That's just terrible. So and then the next part of it was teaching. Like, what do you teach? Not only with your life, but with your words. Like, what teaching people about Christianity, man, and definitely in today's time, I see it a lot. It's a lot of confusion as to what, how does Christianity fit in all these different areas in our culture. And I think that can be, if you are more culture oriented, lean on those type of ideologies, it can hurt a lot of people So I think that's really important to stay grounded in the Bible and in truth, and be able to communicate it well, even though I don't always, but I'll pray. So, but I love that. I love that part of the text. And the next one is in verses 7 through 9 about temptations to sin. This is a famous one. So yeah, I guess if you want to talk a little bit about that, because both of these, Jesus gets really like violent.
Yeah.
This is some violent language.
Yeah. And I think, I just appreciate what Chris was saying and what Jim was saying. Jim reintroduced me to a book called The Cure, and they've done a bunch of leadership lessons, The Cure has. And so it's interesting to see, to now just hearing you guys talk, 7 through 9 plus 5 and 6 are related in the sense of, 5 and 6 is more about leadership. 7, 8, and 9 is more about personal holiness, but it's all the same thing, like if you're humble, you're going to lead others well and not lead them into stumbling. If you're humble, you're going to lead yourself well and not lead yourself into humbling. And it goes back to personal humility. One of my favorite images from The Cure, it's a book by John Lynch. One of my favorite images is you're not cleaning up your life perfectly to get to Jesus. It's Jesus is in your life helping you clean it up. He's with you. And so that is so helpful to think about. So 7, 8, and 9, just taking sin seriously, how horrible it is, all of that, we've got to kind of like be shocked by the horror of sin and how it will kill us. It will destroy us. It'll eat us from the inside. But we also cannot isolate that from the Father's love at the end of this passage and the simple just turn like a child and say, Daddy, help me at the beginning of the passage. Like that's all there. The Father loves you at the end, and humility will save you at the beginning. So we just need to make sure as modern Christians we don't forget how horrible sin is. I think that's why this passage is so helpful for us, because as modern people we're like, sin is just like a psychological entanglement, we might say. But it's really serious. It destroys us, I think of the anyway, I don't know what else to say, but it's serious. It's destructive. I think we should be grossed out about it.
Well, one of the things that they really help us understand through The Cure is that we weren't designed to manage sin. God didn't make us to be able to handle that. And so when we think we can handle it, we are actually contributing to the problem, because our pride is telling us, we can stop doing that. And it's only by, as you put it, holding Jesus' hand, knowing that he is helping us defeat that sin, trusting that he is, that we can overcome those things.
I think it's what Jim was saying, I think it's a submission to him, I can't do this. I need you. Yep. And submitting that struggle to him and allowing the Holy Spirit to give you all types of insight on how to guard yourself and to remove things in your life. And I love the illustration that Jesus used, although violent, but it's so true. I know we've said this in Celebrate Recovery numerous times about eradicating sin out of your life. A famous scripture I always think of is in 1 Samuel, I want to say 15, when he talks about King Agag, and God tells him to destroy all the Amalekites, and Saul still keeps Agag the king and a lot of other these things, and eventually at the end of the story, Samuel chops him to pieces, literally. So that's an example I always use about you have to take sin serious. You can't keep any remnants, anything along with you. You have to just destroy it all. But that takes going to God and asking him to help you, that you can't do it on your own. And I just believe he gives you insight on how to do that, how to literally eradicate sin. Chris, you have any insight on this one?
Good question. I think I just keep thinking about it may be important to say that Christian humility is never just self-contained. Like it's always in the context of God is present. Because I think we can tend to think like we've talked about, Tim Keller says the opposite, where it's not just thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And it's even more than that. It's recognizing God is in the picture and you are under him. Like you said, and so that's just to think, because we could think humble just mean sort of, I mean, it is this concept of meekness, but it's not just I'm sitting around by myself thinking less of myself. It is more like a zooming out and seeing the bigger picture, not zooming in and seeing more of myself and thinking less of myself. So yeah, just have to keep saying that over and over. And that's what makes it beautiful, is the reason I can be a flawed leader is because there's a perfect leader in the picture. And that's what my point is, to point people to him. So
yeah, that's good.
So Dave, you talked in this one, obviously he uses the hand and the eye. So man, these are really, really cool illustrations. And I think your application was pretty much get rid of anything. That it's better just to be with Jesus than to be comfortable with your phone or with anything else.
Yeah.
Elaborate a little bit more on your application for this one.
Oh yeah, well I focused on technology because we're kind of, because of the coronavirus right now, for future listeners listening to this in 50 years, we're all trapped at home, using devices and computers all the time for everything. And it's always an issue, but I think especially now, that's not your life, like if you need to give it up, or if you need to limit it, or if you need to give a friend or a spouse the controls, or you need software, whatever you need to do whatever you got to do, like better to be, I think one of the phrases I used was better to have a maimed device than to have a great fast device and go to hell. Like it's just so, like when you think about what Jesus is saying, it's so obvious, but we're so shocked by it. It's just funny. I don't know. We're wimps. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
I was just saying that made me think of conversations I have so often. I was thinking of the same thing when you were talking, Dave, with people who basically want really convenient and effortless holiness.
Yeah.
So they want to sign up for a program. It's the same with dieting or whatever. That's a metaphor for that, of like, I don't want to exercise or eat well. I just want to lose weight. I want a pill that'll make me holy. And I think that's such an important thing for me to realize and to hold on to, is, holiness is inconvenient. By definition, it is not making concession for the flesh. It's going to be a painful and good thing, but it's worth it. And so if we come with the expectation of, I want the most convenient, effortless solution, which is very American and very technology centric, we're just and none of the pain,
Yeah, that's good.
Jim, you had anything about this one?
Well, a couple thoughts crossed my mind. I think it might have actually been easier before technology because you could stop a magazine subscription. You could take all the magazines out and burn them, put them in the trash, right? Right? And then 1985, we started all this computer stuff, and it wasn't so easy. It isn't really erased. It keeps coming back, even when you don't ask for it. So you really do have to take radical action to make things work so that you can be free from that temptation.
Radical amputation, man. I mean, it's like great. I've been a part of some men's groups who they've shown pictures of literally taking an iPad and a sledgehammer and just destroying it because they knew that they couldn't handle it, or different various things. Now, a lot of times when we come to this, especially me coming to this text, I do think of like behavioral sins, like sexual immorality and things like that. But what about those internal sins, like pride? How do we apply this to something like pride? What do we do to eradicate, like cut the eye out, cut the hand off? Is it not?
Well, I think
Causes pride, or
when I think about it, the hard sayings of Jesus, I think number one, we got to be willing to take the crazy steps, do the hard thing. But we also need to remember the goal is love, compassion, humility. The goal is not doing the hard thing. And I've seen that a lot with young Christians. They're over eager to do the hard thing, which ends up becoming another pride trap. I'm the kind of Christian that does hard things. Look at all the hard things I do, So we just have to make sure we're willing to do the hard thing, whatever hard thing Jesus asks us to. And then we say, okay, Jesus, how can I meet the goal of being genuinely humble, like serving other people? Or, one of the most beautiful examples is Jesus washing the disciples' feet, right? And so, okay, Jesus, are there people that I can serve like that? Not to show off and say, look at the hard thing I'm doing, but so I can actually help them, Right. Are there people I need to actually help? So I think that's a good kind of decision matrix we go down. Like, are there people I need to actually serve? Are there ways I need to actually listen? Are there places for me to control less, trust more? But it's not just so I can say, look, I'm doing hard things. I don't know if that's helpful. But.
No, it is.
It is.
Yeah, it is. Because I just find that can be overlooked at times, because sometimes if you don't deal with a certain behavioral sin, then it's almost like you come to the text like, well, I don't really deal with anything like that, but you have a lot of internal sin. So it's like, how do you, then how do you apply it there? But I think you make some valid points to do that. That's very helpful. Yeah, so many things now that we deal with in our culture, this can be applied to. So it made me think about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think just, a lot of stuff in the culture right now has been about race relationships. And one of the things I've done is I've said, I'm a white man. I'm going to try to listen to more black pastors and scholars. It's just been something I've systematically done. It's not like a magic pill, it will transform me. But I'm like, I don't know that I've listened to a lot of voices. Maybe I could get some insights that I don't have, different culture. And I've tried to do that not just with black voices, but with voices from other countries and other, other nationalities and stuff as well. Like, I have something to learn. I want to make sure I'm not in some kind of echo chamber where I'm just hearing stuff that sounds just like the kind of stuff that I say. And then I'm going to hear stuff that says similar things to what I say, and that'll confirm what I say, and it can be kind of like a, echo chamber is the best way I can think of to say it. So that's something I've done as a teacher to try to just grow in humility and kind of disable my pride switch a little bit more. It's not, like I said, it's not a magic pill, but it's something I think that's helpful.
That's helpful. I know for me in that line, Dave, is like being African American, and especially in this context, has been humbling to me to always make sure that I never put my ethnicity over my identity in Christ. With everything that's going on, obviously I'm passionate about my culture and where I come from, but in everything that I have to judge on the outside, I always have to put it through the lens of Scripture, and I can't allow my ethnicity to override what my faith is telling me, and that that can be hard at times, because obviously you have some form of cultural pride, but that can't. It just, no matter what, it can't trump your faith. To make sure I look at it like that.
That's good.
I get blasted in my inbox, but it's all good.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. I mean, was it Chris or Jim at the beginning? Somebody was saying leadership, the temptation of leaders to act like you've got it all figured out. I think I might invite more critique by being more open-minded, but yeah, I think in the end it's worth it. Like, I'm just thinking like, well, maybe practically I do hurt myself sometimes by being open-minded, or like I might take more criticism because people see it as weakness, but I don't know. I don't know that it really matters. I think bottom line is you just got to be honest and try to keep learning. So
yeah, no doubt about that. Man, good. That's so now let's move on to your third point, which was rejoice in the humble. Rejoice in the humble. So this is Matthew 18:10 through 14. So you want to talk little bit about that one?
Yeah, I just was struck by trying to, scrape together what's the main focus? What's the main focus? It ends with verse 13, he rejoices over the lost one. And then the restatement in verse 14, it's not his will that anyone should perish. So will is a kind of a desire word there. So you're getting at the heart of the Father. His desire is that no one should perish. His rejoicing is in finding the little one. He starts back up at verse 10 with, okay, don't despise. So he's saying, don't despise. Why shouldn't we despise? Well, because the Father rejoices. So just trying to kind of cull that all together. What's the main call to action here is to see the Father's rejoicing, and then we follow suit. We also rejoice.
Whew. Yeah. You got insight on that one, the parable of the lost sheep, which seems different than the one in Luke.
Yes, it is very different. It seems more about wandering believers.
Right.
In this context, it's more like wandering, humble believers. I think in both contexts, it can be applied to a non-believer or a believer in either context. But yeah, Luke 15 is more like about non-believers, and Matt 18 is more like believers. But yeah, either way, I think it's my main point. Either way, it's rejoicing in the humble. Like the Father rejoices to meet our needs. He doesn't go, well, I rejoice 99% to meet the needs of lost people, and then I rejoice 101% to meet the needs of saved people. Like he just rejoices in showing grace, period.
So Dave, I did have a question for you in verse, I want to say verse 11, I believe. Is this?
Guardian angel verse?
Yeah, the guardian angel verse.
Yeah.
I don't remember if you talked about. Did you mention that at all?
I did mention it. Yeah. I mean, I said this is where people say there's this guardian angel thing, and I just said, maybe, but we just don't. A theology lesson is we don't build theology out of one vague verse. So
right.
Maybe we have a guardian angel. I don't think it's necessarily teaching that. It's just saying, hey, the angels are watching out. So you better watch out because the angels are watching out. Don't despise the little ones. So I think it's just a general principle that we can take there.
Wow.
I love the whole platinum rule thing that you will delight in other people to the extent that you note God delights in you. And I think that's really, really good.
Yeah. I like that one. That's always struck me. I'm adding it into my notes because that was off the cuff.
That was a really good one. It just shows you just the love of God. God the Father, that He loves all. All of this is so inclusive. There's no exclusionary language as far as like different people. It's like, hey, He loves all people. Come to Him. Man, this is a really good passage. Chris, what about you, brother? What do you think about this one? This idea of God valuing all people.
Yeah, no, I think it's awesome. I think it came up a little bit in the hanging in the lobby after the service on Sunday morning. I wanted to bring up that topic because I think it's really closely related to all this. But I was going to ask Dave, especially. We know that culturally there's such a big push for self-love. And hanging in the lobby. Had you gotten to percolate on that anymore, or what? Where is self-love right, and where is self-love non-Christianity?
Oh, yeah, the guy responded. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's a great question because it's a very common thing in our culture. So, in our culture, the answer to shame and the answer to self-hatred is basically pride, I think. It's like, take pride in yourself. So don't feel shame anymore, or don't believe in the category of shame anymore, and love yourself. Learn to think you're great. And that's just truncates the gospel, like that misses. So we might agree with the secularist in that the goal would be to move beyond shame and move towards self-love, but you've got to use the gospel to get there. So I guess that would be my critique of how the culture normally uses self-love. Self-love is typically You got to love yourself, and it's like a law thing. Just do it, right? Just love yourself. There's no Jesus loved you by giving himself for you, therefore you can forgive and love yourself. It's just forget the cross, forget the gospel, just love yourself. So I think that's the danger with it.
That's what I see. I see a lot of like, even growing up, I heard a lot of self-esteem talk, like, self-esteem, self-help, and I don't really see that in the Bible. I know when God says love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, strength, but then love your neighbor as yourself. It seems like it's not talking about self-esteem, but more when you care for yourself, you bathe yourself, take care of yourself, you feed yourself, like you clothe yourself. So do unto others as you would want them to do unto you in that regard. But in regards to this idea of self-love, it seems like God teaches us to deny ourselves. Like you need to deny that and accept God's love. And I think it's this replacement of like how you view yourself but you view yourself in light of God, not just you.
Yeah.
So self-esteem to me is like antithetical to the Bible. It's not even legitimate in that regard. But so I think it kind of gets confusing when it does tell us to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. I think that can be confused with self-esteem, and I definitely don't see it that way. I see it more of like you do unto others as you would want them to do to you. Because you care about yourself, and you're not going to just run out in front of a train. You're going to care for yourself. And so you want to take care of others the same way.
I think there's a common sense, and some of the stuff I hear, some of it's common sense, like God don't make junk, or, you know what I mean? Like God made you, so stop shaming yourself. So some of that is more Proverbs than cross,
right?
But it can still be helpful, So I also want to throw out there, there's some other like we're made in the image of God. We have inherent dignity and value, period. But I think ultimately the cross is the real solution. And so I think as you grow in wisdom, you kind of build all those things together. So. Not disagreeing with what you're saying, Elliot. I'm just I'm just thinking out the details, like all the tentacles of this.
I like what you added, though, the image of God. I think that has to start there. It has to start with everyone realizing that we're all made in the image of God, and that's beautiful. That in itself is magnificent. You can rest in that, and I'm glad that you added that because that is the core of what this whole self thing is. It's like you're made in the image of God. He alone distinctly made you and created you beautifully, and that is what should get you excited, is that God did that. So whoever your personality, your skin color, your height, your shape, all of that, God made it, and you can rest and enjoy that, and you don't have to walk around saying me, but instead God.
Yeah, that's good.
And the goal, of course, is a biblical, God-centered view of who you are. Right. And so I think in this conversation, that's what's, try to say it shorthand. Self-hatred is not humility. That's not what we're talking about, right? Because God doesn't hate you, so that's not what we're talking about. And then, as you said, if God loves and came to save, and His desire is for all to be saved, you're not the only one person that He doesn't love. You can't say God loves everyone except me.
Right.
That's not a biblical understanding either. And so you just have to apply it. The things that and that's apply grace to other people than I am to myself. Then that means something's gone out of whack.
That's so good.
Can I dig a little more, Chris? I know sometimes you struggle with that. Have you learned, I'm trying to think of how to say it, what are ways you've personally, gotten better at not beating yourself up? Maybe it's the best way to say it.
Like self-deprecation.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's the afternoon. My brain's not fully there.
Well, you already had a good quote. We could just leave it there. So.
Well, I think actually, honestly, preaching the gospel to others is one of the best ways for me to remember it myself. So I would say that, I'll have conversations with friends and and with fans. I know this well enough to tell somebody else when they're going off the rails. But I need to. So I'll often have these conversations, and then I'll stop and say, "Huh, I need to hear that too," and actually believe it. So I guess that just continuing to try to encourage others really does help a lot.
Okay.
That's good,
Chris. And because in counseling, I had to learn that myself. I remember my therapist was asking me about how to move from my negative thought, and I couldn't do it. I just, for whatever reason, man, I just couldn't. I couldn't do it. And he said, well, what would you tell, as a pastor, what would you tell someone else? And man, the light bulb went off. And this day I use that in my chart when I have those type of emotions. It's like, what? Because it's easy for me to tell someone, man, this is what God says. But it was always hard for me to stop and think about that in regards to myself. And, I have a whole little block, man. How would you preach this to someone else?
That's good. That's good. That's really that. I mean, I would bet that's going to be helpful for a lot of people out there. So I appreciate y'all both sharing that.
What about you, Jim? How you feel about this one, brother?
Well, it's been a struggle for me in my life too, because I'll be the first one to call myself an idiot as soon as I do something that I don't think I should be doing, or just I fail, right?
Right.
And learning to be kind to myself it's a thing in process.
Amen.
To be willing to say, oh, okay, I sin because I have a sin nature, and God still loves me, even though I messed that up. He still loves me, and I think I have to keep on reminding myself that I can't act like, well, it really is a pride thing, right? When I call myself an idiot, because I was proud that I should have been able to do it, right? And now I've been deflated by what didn't happen. And so my pride balloon has popped, and now I'm making myself look bad, I think, to help me feel better. And it doesn't work.
That's so true.
Yeah. It's only by knowing that there's a God in heaven who loves me, and the way he cares for me, that's the way I should care for myself. And his love doesn't always mean that I'm going to be all warm and fuzzy. It may mean that I get rebuked, or that I get confronted by something that I need to hear to recognize that I need you, God.
Oh man, that's so good. So true.
That's good.
Whew, man, that hit me, brother. That's so true. I know sometimes I can definitely struggle with this realization of how much God loves me. And I always got to tell myself. And it's just, I guess it's just because it's so enormous. It's just like, man, because I just, at times, like, I don't deserve it. How can someone love me like this? And, whew, emotional, man. I love this passage. Thank you, Dave, for bringing this word. And so I guess wrap it up, man. Your application for this, I think you used evangelism.
Yeah. I mean, I tried to say, so this is what evangelism is believing the Father rejoices over you, and then wanting to share that good news with other people. So, is that what you're doing? Are you talking to people? Are you pursuing people? Are you chasing after people, the way the Father chases after us? And I think that can look different by gifting, but there should be a general posture of, the Father has this kindly, rejoicing, loving, gracious posture towards me, so I'm going to have a kindly, loving, rejoicing, pursuing posture towards other people. I think, I like to joke, if you're an extrovert, that means, you pursue lots of people, not super deeply. And if you're an introvert, that means you pursue one person deeply in a long conversation, but still, like, we have this posture of pursuit and like, hey, I want to share this good news of a Father that rejoices in us. So.
And you
I think,
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. I was just going to say too, one thing I wanted to throw out there is that what I keep seeing over and over again is this uniquely, I believe it's pretty uniquely Christian thing of confident humility that Jesus displayed. So it's easy to think humility is not being sure of anything, or not, just kind of being wishy-washy about everything, and it's not being certain of anything. And that's not what we're talking about. But the only way, again, to do that is to not be the only person in the picture. Pride says the foundation is me. The foundation of everything is me, and if I'm shaky, everything is shaky. But it's also, and false humility is still I'm the only foundation, and so I've got to not be sure of anything to be humble. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is it's confidence in something else, in someone else, so we can humbly be sure of our Jesus. And that's what's beautiful about preaching the gospel and in a true way, is it doesn't depend on me being perfect and be unchanging and always right, but there is someone who is that, and that's a confidence I think again that Keller shows in what's the long title, The Beauty of Self-Forgetfulness, the freedom of self-forgetfulness. And that's the strange thing that Paul displayed is and Jesus, because humble, and it's this strange thing that nothing can shake, and that's a beautiful thing that we could chase after.
Amen.
Dave, you ended on Philippians 2, man, which is that's probably one of the best passages in the Bible. To show
so good.
Jesus humbled himself and God exalted him. The correlation that Jesus is making with us, that if we humble ourselves, then God will exalt us in heaven. So, man, you want to talk a little bit about that one?
I just love it. As a matter of fact, this week I thought, okay, I need to get Chris to write a song on it, because I talk about it like every other week. Like I feel like I am overusing Philippians 2, and it is a hymn.
I was going to say it's a hymn.
Yeah, most scholars would say it's an early Christian hymn. So I'm like, all right, we just got to get C-Web to set this one to music so we can dwell on it more often. But it's just so rich. Yeah, I love it. There's so much to it. It's got the progress and it's got the whole gospel, but it's kind of set in time with application for believers. It's just beautiful. Yeah. So anyway, I love it. Yeah. It's got the humility and the greatness. So it's got he is great. And actually another little cool word, one of my favorite King James words is vainglory, for conceit. So Paul's application is do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit or vain conceit. And that word is kenodoxia, which is empty glory. So it's like the how we puff ourselves up to pretend we have glory even though we don't, and yet that's contrast with Jesus, who actively emptied himself. So there's a contrast with emptiness, and there's similarities with humility. There's just all kinds of linguistic beauty happening in the Greek. Yeah. It's just an awesome passage. So anyway, everybody go study that passage more.
I always said if God incarnate did this, who are we not to? This is
amazing.
Man, what did you guys have any final comments on Chris and Jim about?
Good.
I want to be good, so I'm gonna go do this.
You want to what?
I want to be great, so I'm gonna.
All right.
Yes.
I'm gonna convert to humility, Lord, mercy, and don't get entangled. Don't entangle the humble.
No entanglement.
Rejoice in the humble. Yes. It's a great message, Dave. I really appreciate.
Thanks, man. Thank you so much
to teach us. Everyone go check the sermon out if you haven't heard it. It's been a beautiful time, and I guess we'll be back here next Sunday. Will Joy be back, or do we know? He'll still be in.
We might be. It might be this crew again for podcast next week.
Man, you will have the B host, and I'll be here to
B host.
You need better self-esteem, Elliot. You're not a B host.
That's a capital B.
Yes, a capital B. B in precedence, not B in quality.
Cool.
Hey, so we love everyone that's out there listening, and man, let's go be great.
All right. Thanks, brother.